Computer Knowledge Education. In this session, you are going to learn Chapter 12, Domain Name System. Content of this video is what is URL type, what is DNS components. Among the components, you are going to learn what is domain namespace. So what is URL? The full form is Uniform Resource Locator. So the URL is the address of a document on the internet. So what is a URL? It is the address of the document in the internet. URL is made up of 4 parts. So the address is made up of 4 parts. What are they? First one is protocols. Next one is host name. Next one is folder name. Then the file name. So first point, URL means it is the address of a document on the internet. Second point, the address has 4 parts. First one is protocol, next one is host name, then folder name, then file name. Each part has its own specific functions. Depending on the applications, additional information can be added to the URL, but the common and fundamental URL consists of 4 parts. Here they are given an example. See here http:// so it is the protocol. Then cms.tn.gov.n, this is said to be domain name or host name. Then in the sites, default, files, press release, these are all folder names. Then there is the file name .jpg, so this file is an image file. So if you are able to see the URL with all the informations. Then URL type. Depending on the location of a document, the URL is divided into 2 types. So what are they? One is absolute URL, another one is relative URL. So absolute URL is the complete address of a document on the internet. So absolute, complete. Absolute URL contains all the informations that are required to find the files on the internet. These are similar to postal address. If any of the information is missing, then the post will not be delivered to the right person. Yes, if you miss the pin code or if you miss the street name, door number, then the delivery will not be in proper manner. Similarly, if any of the 4 parts is missing, then the browser would not able to link to a specific file. So all the 4 parts is very important in absolute URL. So absolute URL requires all the 4 parts. Then what about relative URL? Relative URL is the partial address of a document on the internet. Relative URL contains only file name or file name with folder name. So we can use this type of URL when the file is on the same server related to original document. So this is the difference between absolute URL and relative URL. So you have learned the URL type. Now we'll see what is the domain name system components. There are 3 components. One is namespace, another one is zone, another one is name server. So what is the namespace? The domain names must be very unique and appropriate. The names should be selected from a namespace. The namespace can be organized in 2 ways. The domain name is nothing, the name going to be given to the IP address. IP address means IP address is used to identify a host in a computer. So what are the 2 categories of namespace? One is flat namespace, another one is hierarchical namespace. So what is flat namespace? Flat namespace is where the name is assigned to the IP address. They do not have any specific structure. In the flat namespace, some meaningful names are given to the IP address for accessing. So a computer will be given a name. The major disadvantage of flat namespace is that they cannot be used in large system. Yes, as the number of hosts or number of nodes present in a network is very large. So it is not possible to give different names to each system because they need to be accessed and controlled centrally to avoid ambiguity and redundancy. Ambiguity and redundancy means redundancy represents duplicate data. That means repeated name. Ambiguity means same name will be given to many systems. So then it will be in a confusion. So the errors will occur. But it is difficult in a flat name system to control if the name is given randomly without any structure to the IP address. To avoid this major disadvantage, hierarchical namespace is used in large. So let's see what is hierarchical namespace. So hierarchical namespace is where the name is made up of several parts. First part may represents the nature of organization. Then second part represents name of organization. Then third part may represents the department of the organization and so on. So there is a hierarchy and there is a procedure to have this. In this way, the power to control the namespace can be decentralized. So this method is going to help to have an effective name to the IP address. So in the hierarchical namespace method, domain namespace is formed. So the domain namespace was designed to achieve hierarchical namespace. In this, the names are represented as a tree-like structure with root element on the top, and this tree can have maximum of 128 levels starting from root element taking the level of 0 to level 127. That means the root is 0, this dot. Below that edu, below that there is another name, below that there is another name. So it can move up to 127 level. So this is the method followed in hierarchical namespace. So based on this methodology, domain namespace is formed. That means name for the IP address is framed. While forming or framing the namespace, we must know two things. One is name, another one is label. So what is a label? Here can you see challenger at atc.fhda.edu. So while we read the IP address, it will be like that. But the format is we will read from bottom to top. That means the label is a string which can have maximum 63 characters. So the label which is said to be that edu, fhda, atc. So each is a label. Each word is a label. So the word can be in 63 characters. Each node in that level should have different labels. Yes, everything should be different, thereby assuring the individuality of the domain name. In other words, labels are the names given to domains. Domain is the subtree in domain namespace tree structure. Domain can be further divided into subdomain. So see here, each word is represented as label, but the domain name means it is in a form. It is in a complete sentence. That is challenger at atc.fhda.edu is a domain name. And if I leave the first letter and first word and taking atc.fhda.edu, second, this three letters together, three words together form another domain name. So domain name is the sequence of labels. Yes, a domain name can have any number of labels. This domain name is having 1, 2, 3, 4 labels. Here it is only 3 labels. In domain name, the sequence of labels are represented by dot. Yes, it is formed with the dot. Domain name is always read from the lower level to higher level, that is from the leaf node to the root. Since the root node always represents null string, all the domain names end with dot. So here the root represents the dot. So this is the way how the name and the labels are combined and form the domain name system. Okay, we know labels, it's at 63 characters. Then there are some rules to form the domain names. What are the rules? First one, alphabets can contain of alphabets A through Z, A to Z, and digit 0 to 9. Hyphens are allowed, but hyphens cannot be used as first characters of the domain name. Then spaces are not allowed. Special symbols such as are not permitted. Domain names have the minimum length of 2 and the maximum length of 63 characters. Entire name may be most 253 characters long. Domain names are not case sensitive. It may be upper, lower, or mixing of both case letters. So these are the basic rules to frame the name. After that, there are some levels. For example, the first one is said to be root level. There won't be any string. It is said to be null string. Below that is the top level domain, .in, .net, .org, .com. So these things are familiar for us because whenever we cross a familiar website, it will be .com or .org, .net, .in. Then second level domains, then subdomains. So the domain names have a level. So generic top level domain names. Generally, these are the top level domain names. Generic top level domains are used for generic purpose and maintained by IANA, that is Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. So COM means commercial organization, EDU means educational institutions, GOV government, MIL military group, ORG non-profit organization, NET networking organization, info information service providers. So these are the top level domain names. Then country top level domain names. By seeing the IP address, that means by seeing the website address, sometimes we will be able to know the country by seeing these letters. Country domain uses 2-character country abbreviation according to the country. Google.in means for India, Google.us means for US. So IN, US, FR for France, UK for United Kingdom, CA for Canada, AU for Australia, ILK for Sri Lanka, BD for Bangladesh, CN for China, PK for Pakistan, JP for Japan, SG for Singapore. Let's have a recap. So we learned what is Uniform Resource Locator, URL. The types of absolute and relative. Absolute means complete address, relative means partial address. Then we learned the DNS components. What are the 3 components? Namespace, zone, and name server. So in the namespace, there are 2 things. One is flat name, another one is hierarchical. So flat name is a name without a structure, but it is difficult to maintain. Hierarchical means it is having a structure. Then based on that, we are framing the domain name and label. Then we know the levels of domain names: top level, second level, and subdomain names. So these are the things you have learned in this video. Thank you. Have a good day.